So I was getting a lot of inspiration on the inside, and I was growing so much on the inside, and I needed expression, but I didn't know what was going on with me. So that was happening. And so in the moment of growth, what happens when you grow is that it's easy for you to start spotting things you can give value to. So I was growing, listening to those inspiration. And then I started spotting that, oh, you know what? I can see this gap in society. It would be nice to plug into this. Now, I wasn't clear how I wanted to plug into the gap, but I was like, oh, I could provide a solution for this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Growth Plug podcast once again. And today I have, I'll say, a mentor from someone I've been talking to. And yeah, we've been having wonderful conversations around life transitioning and all those interesting stuff. And she's here today to share her perspective and tell us about her own journey to becoming a transition coach and empowering people to move from one stage of their life to the other. I'll let her introduce herself and we'll kick it off from there. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on such a timely podcast. I'll put it that way. You know, the first chat we had, I was telling you that this is quite timely. If I had this resource when I was making my many transitions years back, I'm sure I might have made better decisions. So well done, and thank you for having me. So how do I introduce myself? Usually I like to let people know that first, I'm a perception shaper, and I basically am someone who is very passionate about people making the best of everything they have in every season. I've learned over time that, we really have everything we need in every season we find ourselves. I know the question in the minds of a lot of people sometimes is, oh, are you really sure of what you're saying? But I always tell them that the challenge is finding out what those things are, but they are there. We have everything we need, using the words of the podcast name, to plug in to what it will take for us to succeed in every season. So I'm very passionate about helping people to really identify that in themselves and in their situations, and being able to hold on to the name or the reference name. The perception shaper has been very pivotal for me in this area. For a lot of other people who probably will be meeting me for the first time today, many people call me FolaFayo. And that's like a combination of some of my names. And of course, if you use FolaFayo to refer to me, you don't have to put a Mrs. in front of it. You don't have to put coach in front of it. And if you're a person of faith, you don't have to put pastor, Mrs. in front of it. I'm fine. You can call me FolaFayo. A 2-year-old can call me FolaFayo. But of course, my birth name is Bukola Ogunfayo. So if you're someone who's like, let me go look for her name somewhere, it's Bukola Ogunfayo, but you can call me FolaFayo. And what I do today as a perception shaper is I support leaders and executives to ace their transition. Just as Wilson said, this is something that a lot of people are going through today. And the support to be able to make it right is something that I feel a lot of people would benefit from. And that's what I'm focused on today. I also podcast, though the podcast is on a season break right now. And what we share on the podcast are, tips that can help that person to thrive in their season and to transition with smoothness, and with ease of some sort. I also have a background in architecture. So I have this thing with design. It's still there. Of course, I don't design buildings anymore, but my conversations are around helping people to, design the future they want, the future they see in a safe place, and in a place where there's accountability as well. And then, of course, I have a passion for photography. And just before I focused fully on, coaching, I used to do a lot of private sessions, helping people to create their headshots for LinkedIn, their website pages. And I still do that by the side. So maybe if you grab me in your hood sometime, I might be able to do something for you. But I really like that
You
space
didn't
because
tell
of
me about the photography. I'm just hearing that for the first time.
oh yeah. And it was one of the things that tied the perception shaping for me when I started to use that with my name some years back, because I was actively podcasting, I was doing the photography, and I was coming into coaching. And I realized that all the things I was doing at that time were helping me to provide a perception shaping opportunity for people. So when you create headshots, what people do is that you're presenting an image that lets others have a particular perception of themselves. So for me, I saw that I was helping people to create that. And of course, with my podcast, you're seeing the situations you're in a more inspiring way to take the steps you want to take. And of course, in coaching, then you're actually taking those steps as well as you get clearer. So that for me was, where it all, connected together. And so, yes, that's what I do. I'm married. I've been married for over 19 years now. So we're close to our 20th in December, and we have 3 children. I'm currently joining Wilson now from the US, and yes, it's great to be here.
No, really nice. And thank you once again for coming. So architecture, photography, and now helping people with their perception. How did this journey start? By the time you were studying architecture, did you think you'll get to the point where you leave core design of buildings to helping people design their lives? So did that cross your mind when you were studying architecture?
So when I was doing architecture, I didn't think about it. But I knew that there were a lot of other things by the side that had caught my attention over the years, right? So before I started on architecture, you know how it is as a child, you're talking to your parents and your uncles and aunties different times. What would you want to do when you grow up, And you're saying
Yeah.
all sort of, so I was like that, regular child. I would say, okay, today I want to be a flight attendant, then we used to call it air hostesses, right? Oh yeah, I want to be, then I heard one of my friends once say she wants to be a military doctor, and I was like, oh yes, I also want to be a military doctor. And then I realized I didn't like anything with biology. I was like, no, scrap doctor out. I don't want to do anything in the medical field, But I know that while I came into my discovery of architecture, in fact, I decided on architecture as I got into SS1. For many people who probably would know the system in Nigerian education, you have junior secondary, and then you have the senior secondary, which many schools would probably refer to as high school. We had to pick subjects, and I was at that time already leaning towards my favorite subjects and the subjects I found really easy for me to do well in, and there were maths, physics, and fine arts. So for me, it was like architecture was just like a straightforward thing. My dad, being an engineer, had always wanted me to do something around engineering. So for a long time, I thought I was going to do engineering. But when architecture came to my awareness and I knew that I was comfortable with technical drawing, I was like, oh, well, this is something I should focus on instead. So I decided on architecture way before I left secondary school. But again, like I was saying, there were other things that I was doing by the side that pointed to this eventually being what I would do. I was, part of a number of groups in secondary school and in the university that allowed me to do counseling and sessions with people. So I was always engaged in helping people to be in an inspiring state. So I'd never left that. So while I was doing my architecture on one side, on the other side, I was running along with supporting people to be the best they can be the best they can be. And, finally coming into, graduating and taking the leap out of paid employment to, before I left paid employment, basically was leaving architecture for the bank was one of the biggest things that started revealing the people possibility for me, because after a few months, I joined the human resources team, and it was in that place that I saw what you could do with people. And I think that for me connected the dots fully with what had been happening all the while for me. So I wouldn't say I had the picture of those things when I chose Aki or when I was studying Aki, but they were there. And that's why I always tell people when it comes to the choices we make eventually in life, the dots are there. The breadcrumbs have been there. It's just that we probably ignored them or we felt they were not important in the moment, but they've always been there. So I would say that it was by the side there. And it was easy for me to kind of like look through, when you're driving and you have those blind spots and then you're like, oh my God, this thing I've always been doing. Exactly. That was how it was for me to eventually decide that this is what I would settle into.
Oh, interesting. So you started off and a piece of it here and there, and it started making sense by the time you moved to HR. At what point did you then decide to leave paid employment to become a full-time entrepreneur? At what point was there a trigger for that, or you just knew it was time to completely transition to that?
That's a great question. I like the word you used. Was there a trigger there? There was a trigger. But I think it was a build-up point, and then the trigger happened. So the build-up was, and that's why I would tell people maximize whatever you have, right? So being someone who if you live in Lagos, you will know that we have this mainland and island axis and things like that. So office was on the island, home was on the mainland. And so all those transit times, I used to get to listen to a lot of all these motivational CDs in transit, Jack Canfield and a lot of all these other messages from church. And my church was very big on success and things like that. They start then. And so I was getting a lot of inspiration on the inside, and I was growing so much on the inside, and I needed expression, but I didn't know what was going on with me. So that was happening. And so in the moment of growth, what happens when you grow is that it's easy for you to start spotting things you can give value to. So I was growing, listening to those inspiration. And then I started spotting that, oh, you know what? I can see this gap in society. It would be nice to plug into this. Now, I wasn't clear how I wanted to plug into the gap, but I was like, oh, I could provide a solution for this. And the gap was, observing through the HR team that I was in, that people join the workforce being clueless about a lot of things from school. Except if you have like an older sibling who engages you on the things they do at work. A lot of people who are fresh graduates don't know jack. So that's why organizations go through so much plugging people in. They go through so much. So I was seeing that happen, and I was like, oh, what if people had this, some form of solution? I wasn't even sure what solution I was going to create that would help them to really be more prepared to fit in. So that was the gap I was looking at. But then the gap was even wider for me at that point, because I was thinking, oh, what about that secondary school student leaving for college who also has that gap point and don't know how to move into that? But at that time, I didn't even know it was called transitions. I was just thinking, oh, I would, there's a gap. So I was growing on the inside. I was seeing a gap I was becoming a little passionate about. And then I also had friends who I had seen that were leaving paid employment. In fact, I had a particular family friend of ours who said this once, because we used to have all these family, hangout things. And then he was saying once, when we asked him, why did he leave? He left a multinational to start his own thing. And that was years ago. Just like within the first 5 years or 3 years of his marriage, he left. And then we're like, why? How come you took this decision now? And he said something. He said, I don't want to regret not taking this decision now in the future. And I was like, oh, wow. I mean, that's a big one, because it's possible for years to pass by. And then you're like, if I had known, I would have taken this decision years ago, So that kind of stayed with me. And then I started asking myself, if you're seeing what you can do beyond work, why not think about it? So it was also another seed that was dropped in my heart. But I think one thing that really pushed me off as the trigger at that point was where I was now becoming uncomfortable. I didn't see growth opportunities there. I didn't see that I was being challenged there. I had been on a program years before that kind of also motivated me to leave architecture. And many of my co-participants in the program were in C-suite roles already in other organizations. And I didn't seem to be having that career path where I was. So I was getting, uncomfortable. I was dissatisfied. And I was like, so why not now? Why not now? And then when everything was happening in my team then, and they were changing leadership, and it took a lot for you to represent yourself again, I just told my husband, this is it. This is the time to leave. This is the time to leave. So that for me, it was like a lot of things building up, and then the discomfort. I was thinking into it as, we connected today, and I was like, I feel like if the place I was in was comfortable, I probably wouldn't have taken the option. I wouldn't have. For some people, what happens is there's just this downsizing, and your name is on the list, and then you're pushed into it. For me, I was just, you're going to work every day, and you know that something is not given, it's not connecting like you want it, and that was what happened for me. So I knew it was the time to leave.
I think that's a big indicator, right? It goes beyond the money. You just know that there is something locked up, probably, that is not finding expression where you are. And like you said, maybe if you don't take that step, you look back a couple of years later and you're like, this is what my life turned into. Maybe I should have. So once it's clear, once you have that, but I always tell people, understand your why, your how, and your what. I think The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. If you understand these things clearly, it helps you make a decision and stand by it, even when it doesn't look easy. Okay, let's talk about transitioning. Now you help people transition. What should people consider when they want to transition? In fact, I just had a conversation some minutes ago before we jumped on this call, and somebody is currently in that situation where she wants to transition, but is not sure how to go about it. I am skilled in this area. The opportunity so far has been in this industry, but I know I don't want to be here. I want to go to this other industry. I want to do something else, but how do I start? What should I do?
Amazing,
So
amazing.
let's
Good
just
question.
start. Yeah,
Good question. Well, let me just put this out first of all before I just give a general approach that
yeah,
could be considered is that transitions will differ for everyone. That's the first thing you just need to understand when you're about to make that intentional transition, because transition sometimes we just find ourselves in it. It's not like we plan it.
yeah,
In this case of this person, she's actually trying to trigger it by herself, which is
yeah,
good. It's usually good when you feel like you're in control of that change, as against someone that just gets pushed into it and they find out that, oh my God,
yeah,
changes are happening now and I need to make my, I need to be adaptable or to be flexible. So, transitions come in different forms. And if you can know that it will be unique for you as it is for someone else, and also know that it will be for you, it will be unique for you today versus another time in your life. That's also something you need to know. It
okay,
won't be the same. It won't be the same. So, like when I described leaving architecture and joining the bank, that was a transition that might have looked a little bit similar to leaving what I was doing to do something on my own, but it was different in the context. There were a lot of things that were absent and present in different ones. So that understanding is very important to have. Then there's a code that I kind of put together some years back. I have a free download on it. I can just give a brief, outline on it right now. And it's free for download on thepolishedlens.com. But the code is saying that you need to have a sort of conscious awareness of what is going on in your mind per time. Your mind needs to be in a place where you're not just doing things as they come. There's a consciousness on your choices. There's a consciousness on the predominant thoughts you're permitting about yourself or about the situation or about the people involved in that transition for you. So that's the C in the code. Then there's the O of the code that says you have to own that season. Owning that season is really understanding what is the change involved here, and what is it really going to look like for me when I'm fully done, and how do I take responsibility for the change without giving a full portion of that change to someone else to handle. Because for you to be able to ace your transition, you must be in control of a good part of it. Now, there'll be some things that are beyond your control, but a good part
yeah,
of it, you must be in control of that. So that's when you're owning your season. And then the D is about discovering yourself again. When I was saying that it's unique for you now and maybe different for you in another time of your life, it's because you
yeah,
grow, you change. There are a lot of things that make you change. I mean, even look at you. You probably are not who you were some years back.
yeah.
We were talking some time ago and you were telling me how you were, preparing for marriage. You're a different guy today, even though you're just a few weeks old married. You're a different person, yeah? So just knowing
Yeah,
that as you come through that transition, there's a new discovery you have to have about yourself is also key.
yeah.
So the D in the code is discovering yourself,
Mhm.
discovering the strengths you're going into that transition with, discovering the things you probably don't have in that transition, right? And then, of course, discovering the goals you want to achieve through that transition. Because you could go through a transition today, right? And while you may be saying, I need freedom. That's the reason why I'm leaving paid employment. Somebody may be saying, I want to make impact. That's the reason why I'm leaving paid employment. I'm leaving
Yeah,
paid employment because I've been so busy, I've not been able to use my gift. Somebody is saying, I need time for my family. So it looks similar, but the goals are different. So the D is saying, who are you and what you want to achieve, right? And it's the goals and yourself. And then the E, that one I call my baby because it's something I sat down someday and, the understanding came to me. I believe very much that was God inspired. And it was more like a formula. I call it the thriving formula. And it's a formula you have to think about when you're in any season. And that formula says that at every point in time in life, you have some giving you have to do. You have some activity you have to do. You have some decisions you have to make. You have to show up in a particular way. There's some expectations you have to take up, right? On one side. But what many people do a lot of times when they live life is they're so focused on what they need to give and they're not thinking about what needs to fill them. So they are thinking about the outflow and they're not thinking about the inflow. Now, with the inflow, you're saying that there are some elements you require at certain levels of quantity, certain levels of quality, and certain frequencies for you to be able to balance your outflow. And those things will change with time. So, for example, someone who takes a maternity leave and she's in that state of maternity leave, the rest she needs in that moment is more than the rest she will have required at a time when she's building a project, putting things together. that is on the rest element. So a lot of people could ask, oh, FolaFayo, what makes up the elements of the inflow? You have things like soulful networks. You have things like rest and relaxation. You have things like growth. And that's why people like us will say you need to listen to podcasts, you need to read books, stuff, things like that. So what are you feeding yourself with, right? And then there are also other things like physical activity. Some people actually need to be more fit in that season.
Yeah.
So those are the things you need to be looking at to say, I need more of this. I need this at this frequency. I need to now do it, or I need less of this. Some people need to realize that I need less of this in this season. I can't hang out with my friends as it's something I require, but I can't afford to have a lot of it. And one example that I use a lot when I talk about the E in the code, and that is the element of soulful connection, is what happens with a lot of us who have stayed in great teams in the corporate space. So you come to work and you have all these amazing ideas. You're going back and forth with your colleagues and you enjoy it so much. The conversations are so, enriching. You're charged. You're thinking about what's happening in the government, what's happening internationally, what's happening with currencies, foreign exchange and things like that. And you have that conversation, right? And you're having that connection. You feel fulfilled and you're doing your work. You're going in for meetings. You're stimulated a lot. Now, imagine that person being a female. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, you know what? I also want to go and do my own thing in the home space, but I'll start and build it at home. And for the first few months, she's not intentional to keep those soulful connections. And so what happens to such a person is the only person she's having an interaction with is maybe her husband if she's married. And that conversation happens only maybe 1 hour per night, right? And then she does some toddler talks if she has only toddlers. So a toddler is saying blah, 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 blah. So this is someone who is coming from a high level of interaction in the organization to a low, and that gap. And before you know, that person starts saying, you know what, I don't think this home space thing is for me. And they're not able to say, this is what is missing, because they didn't have that reflection moment to say, this used to help me to thrive. And I would need a quantity of it in this way as I make my transition. So for me, I always say, you know what, going back to your question on how does someone approach transition, I would say, first of all, you just need to know what kind of transition is going on there. And then you need to use the code to kind of check where you are, rate yourself. Where are you on your C, on your O, on your D? There are other things that I kind of bring up as well in the conversation, especially if someone is doing like a major career change, like you're coming into a new leadership role, and we are looking at things like the milestones of things you want to achieve within the first 90 days of work, what you're going to do to make your team, your new team, connect well with you. How are you going to understand how the teams engage? So those other additional things can come in if it's a career transition. But a regular life transition, if you make use of the code, you are basically in a better place than someone who just went into it and is not even checking out what's going on. So that's probably how I would say they should look at it. But it's always good to include in that support system. Nothing beats that. It's amazing to have a support system when you go through a transition.
In fact, I was going to ask that at a point, how important is support, having the right support when transitioning? Because for a lot of people, it's scary, right? You don't know, probably you're in the comfort zone, but for some reason you want to transition. You don't know what is waiting for you at the other end of the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, it can be scary. And some people, you find them second guessing, right? So where is the place for mentorship, for example? Because someone like me, transitioning from production engineering to IT, I think my mentors played a huge role, right? Because I've seen someone who has done it. I've seen this person is successful at it. When I talk with this person is like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. Even days where it feels overwhelming. So that support, maybe just to elaborate a little more on it, should people be doing transition by themselves, where you just go and you sit? And I know there's so many information out there right now. You can pick things off the internet, you can read, but should people really do this by themselves, or should they reach out to probably a coach, probably a mentor, probably another colleague or somebody? How important is that phase and that support system for them? Maybe just a little more on it.
Yes, I would say it is an amazing, a powerful, a game-changing requirement for you to ace a transition. See, I look back, so I was thinking about if I had to do my transitions again, some of the ones that, took a long, so it's not as if you won't achieve your results, but you're asking yourself, how well do you want to achieve the results? So yes, you can do it on your own. So for someone who says, well, I don't really want someone to intrude on my space. I really like to have autonomy with the things I do. Fine, you can, you will. So we're not, Wilson and myself are not telling you can't do it. You can, but when you're done, you will know that it's different when you had someone in your space with you, right?
Yep.
And so there are different kinds of support you could be leaning into, and that could also drive how you plug into a support at that time. So there's the mentor one that you said, and you've given an example of. The mentors, what they serve to do with you when you're going through a transition is to tell you and reinforce for you over and over again that it can work because it worked for them. They can give you that assurance because they've been down that road before. So they're not just telling you what you should do. There's an assurance they're telling you that it can work because I've done it. That's what a mentor would do for you. So if you're someone who is like, I need someone who will be telling me that all the time, a mentor will be very helpful in that situation because they've done it before. A growth partner or an accountability partner is someone who is on that journey with you as well, who is doing something similar. I may not be equal. And that was one of the things that helped me in my own time, right? So I had like a friend, she was also coming into, and it was interesting how we connected after some years. And we found out both of us were going into coaching at the same time. And we're like, what's going on? And we're so passionate about it. So we're doing a lot of brainstorming. And then there were a lot of nights when we would connect even with the different time zones. And I would be like, I'm setting up this program. At that time, I didn't even have a lot of structure with the things I was doing. She was like, I'm setting up this program. Okay, what documents are you using to design this? Well, we had that happening. So you have someone you are exchanging ideas with. So a growth partner, if you can find, is good. Now, some people are community people. They like to do things with groups. And in such a case, you want to look for a community that might be doing something similar. And then you're hearing stories of a lot of people. So it's not just one person's story. A mentor will give you just their story. But a community, you hear, oh, this person's story, then you can refine and say, oh, this person did it this way, and you're combining and you're, putting it together and you're saying, okay, this is how I'll customize for myself. So you're in a safe place with a community. So a community can give you that if you're a community person or a mastermind group. Because that's one of the reasons why one of the models I use when I take people through certain changes and transformation is to use a mastermind group format, because you are engaging intentionally and there are other people in the space with you. So you are building together. You're not just the only one. So that's an option of a support that people can also look out for. But then a coach, and which is why we always try to differentiate this for a lot of people, is a coach is someone who is not necessarily ahead of you in that path. So you're moving into IT. Doesn't mean you must get a coach that has moved into IT. A person who is coaching you is someone who is standing outside of your frame and helping you to point at the big picture that you cannot see all the time. That's what they do. They are outside of what you're doing. So the kind of things a coach brings into a conversation are things you'll be like, I never thought about that. Because they're not telling you what to do. They're helping you to unpack things you're not thinking about. Because if you come to me, for example, in a coaching session and you say something I don't know, it's easy for me to ask a question. I'm like, I could say, oh, so why don't you go through the left to the door? But because everybody in that space, they've always gone through the right. In your mind, you're like, just because I never thought about it, what could happen if you go through the left? I'm like, well, I don't know. Is this something you would want to try? I'm like, okay, I can give it a shot. So that's what happens when you're working with a coach, because there's a clarity that comes from perspectives you would never have considered. So someone who's really coaching you is not really telling you what to do, but they are helping you to dig deep into the solutions that you hold. Because every single person, like I said earlier, you have all that it takes to thrive in every season. So the coach helps you to unpack what you have, gain clarity. And the thing about clarity is this: the clearer you get on something, the more confident you are to take that step. And the reason why many people sometimes don't take some things quickly is because they don't know what they see yet. But when you know what you see, you can move with confidence. So the example I usually use to reinforce this is, think about your house, or maybe the space you're in right now. If, for example, there's a power cut and the place is dark, if it's a place you are not scared, in fact, that if you stand up, if you just do one step here,
like this,
you've touched this cupboard, you've touched this shelf, you are aware, you are confident in that space. But guess what? If we exchanged locations and there was a power cut, you will probably be in that place for a long time. Because in your mind, you're like, FolaFayo, are you here? Can you hear
Where
me?
are you? Please come home.
I'm telling you because you're like, how do I go? And I will even be the one telling you, stay where you are. I'll be bringing the power source. So that's what happens with working with a coach, because it's like you become familiar. So even though it's not as certain, there's a confidence there because you're like, I know if I navigate like this, navigate that way, that can happen. That's what happened with working with coaches. But then the other one that I feel is also really beneficial that we shouldn't miss out of is the voices of people who really care. So if you're married, you need to lean on your spouse. Oh my God. You lean on your spouse as much. If they're not asking you what you need, go and tell them, ask me to ask you what I need. Make that, because I shared a video recently on how we're making a recent transition. My family was moving again, and my husband just took some time. We usually have that catch-up time when we make a change. And then he said, do you need anything? When he asked me, I felt so relieved, because in fact, in my mind, I didn't even think to go and ask him, what do you need now to make this even smoother for us as a family? And it was really so heartwarming getting that question. So you need to tell the closest people to you. If that's all you're going to get, that, look, I'm making this change, I'm looking out for this, just pray for me if you're a person of faith, or just ask me. And if I need something, I just want to know that someone has got my back as I make this decision. And for maybe a guy who is leaving paid employment to go and start his own thing, your wife too may be like, this steady income that we've been getting, how are we going to work around it? You
Don't
need
play
to
with it.
exactly. And then she can say, okay, babe, before you take that leap, right? Can we just agree we will do this first? And then so you are in alignment with someone. There's an agreement going on there. So those are the variety of supports that you want to at least plug into and intimate and, give some information to when you're making your change, so that you don't feel alone when you're going through a transition. But having someone in your corner, fantastic. Yeah.
Wonderful. This week happens to be on the 8th of March is the International Women's Day, right? And perfect opportunity for you to tell us something. Women who are going through transitions, because like you said, at different times, different seasons, I feel even for men and women, transition might be different, right? I feel, I don't know, but I feel because everyone has their unique properties and characteristics. So for women going through transition, what do you have for them? Is there anything to say to them? Just leveraging the opportunity we have celebrating our women.
Awesome. I feel like the one thing that I know happens in transitions, and this is not just even for females, but also for the guys as well, is that there's a lot of changes that will be going on your inside. And you don't want to miss that out. You want to just observe the growth you're going through your transitions, right? The unique thing that happens with women a lot of times is we have a lot more we're thinking about when we're going through transitions, especially if you're a family person. You're thinking about your spouse, you're thinking about your children in particular, and you're wondering how is this going to impact them. And sometimes you just have to look at the timing and seasons of your life and to see what you can trade off. Because some things might require a sacrifice in the moment. And the challenge we have as women in the moment of sacrifice is being guilty. When we're making some trade-offs and we're thinking, we can't do this at this time. But then if it's something that might not really ever come back as an opportunity for you to make a change like that, then you might just need to intentionally build up a support structure that can make you maximize that moment. I guess that's about the only thing I can say in addition, but everything else around transitions is as applicable to the woman as it is to the man. You're making a change, you're going to be a different person when you're done. You're making a change, you will need someone. And I think that this whole support system thing, while men can lean on maybe one friend and they're fine, and of course some of them do engage in the corporate space, executive coaches to support them. For a woman, women usually need community. So if you're going through a change, please lock into your friendship with your friends. And don't wait also till you are going to make that transition before you strengthen the friendship you have. Because finding the right friend through a transition can be tough. I have realized that actually. Because when you're growing And friends can, and I just heard this also somewhere recently as well, and it connected so well. When you're growing, sometimes the friends you have might not be able to connect with growth. And so they say things like this to you, that you're changing. They can't quite say you're growing. They say you've changed. So as you make that change in your life, you need to have those friends that you know, and you can tell that they're also intentional about growth, because you are now comfortable to be vulnerable. And because it's in the place of vulnerability that you can find strength outside of you, because that person can now lend from their strength to your strength in that moment to make you really go through that, phase.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight on what our women can do while transitioning along with the men. Yeah, do you want to tell us about the polished lens? Let me guess, the polished lens is coming from both your photography, yeah, your passion to view things in another perspective, to shape things. Is that it? Am I correct?
Exactly that. As in, make it simple, the polished lens, I know that there was a day I was thinking a lot into, the name, when I settled on the name years ago, and I was thinking a lot about the different lenses of life that we'd use. And I was thinking about, the telescope. It helps you to look farther. And one of the things we do when we work with people is to say, how far are you really seeing this? Are you really seeing this thing that you're talking about in this session far enough? To let people to look far, because a lot of times we are so consumed with the present. And that happens a lot for people who are activity and project biased.
Yeah.
You're like, oh gosh, I need to do this. Our corporate people, our business starters, that's what they're thinking about. So we're saying you also need to be looking at, how far you can see stuff. And, when you also look at, what I said earlier on about the blind spot, where I didn't know there were things going on there, and I had to check that out, is also seeing into the wider lens of what is possible, that you probably have been playing around with, dabbling into, growing in, but you didn't even count it as anything. So that's also part of it. Then you also look at the microscope. What does the microscope do? The microscope expands things that you cannot see with the regular eye. You're looking deeper into a situation, and sometimes you're looking deeper into yourself. I know that for a lot of the sessions I have with clients, sometimes they're like, when we're done, I'm like, so how was the session for you? They're like, I didn't even think I was that kind of person. I wasn't seeing myself in that light before. So that happens a lot in the sessions where there's a deep soul searching happening. And you're looking deeper, and it's like what the lenses can do, because these are your own lenses, but you're positioning it a bit differently. And then you also think about the lens of a camera. The lens of a camera helps you to capture moments. And what we don't do a lot of times, we are just living past-paced, and we're not taking time to look at what we've captured, to say, okay, reflect on it and have that. So the polished lens is really trying to do that with as many executives and leaders would need that to ace transitions and to thrive in their seasons. And the way we've gone about it in the last few years, I said earlier, is we have mastermind groups, and we have them just annually for now. And that might change as we go on, but we have them just annually. So I always tell people when we launch it that if you don't join this cohort, you have to wait for the next year's own. So if what you're trying to achieve in your life can wait for a year, then you wait. Otherwise, this is the time to walk in. Yeah. So we have the mastermind group. We have one, which we should be having around May, June this year, as usual. And the focus is on for executives and leaders going through transitions. So if you're someone who says, I like a community atmosphere to learn and to rub minds, that's the one you should be looking out for. And then for other people who are like, you know what, I have kind of peaked in my wealth creation in life. I know there has to be another level. It's not as if I'm not enjoying what I'm earning today, but I know that there's something I've not caught on to. Then the mastermind group we have, October, November, is the one to think about. It is the Wealth Shift Mastermind Group. And that we ride on the book by Wallace D. Wattles. The book, The Science of Getting Rich. It's a fantastic, fantastic book. It's one of my favorite books on wealth creation. You can read it on your own, you can read it with friends, but there's something about just being in an intentional, facilitated session on it. You have a different outcome. That has been our testimony for years. So that's the other mastermind group we have. So we have the mastermind groups that we do. Then we also have other resources, of course, this one-on-one coaching, because some people will be saying May, June. I said I want to transition tomorrow. FolaFayo, you're telling me wait till May and June. So for someone who can't wait, for those that can't wait, of course, we have the one-on-one. And then depending on, the intensity or the priority or the urgency of the change you want to go through, you could take the private coaching, you could do accountability partnership. Those are all stated clearly on the website, The Polished Lens. So you have the coaching, you have the mastermind group, and then of course we have other resources for leaders that we could also use to help people to, just see better and make better decisions. That's really ultimately what we are passionate about doing. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I'll share the link to the Polished Lens in the comment section. So please do reach out to her so you can see clearly and have different perspective.
Exactly, better perspective. Yeah.
This has been wonderful. It's been amazing having you on this episode. Thank you for the energy. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for just sharing from your wealth of experience. I learned the code and I learned it for free. So thank you. Usually I know I should pay for that, but you've taught me for free. So thank you so much. Any final words or any other thing you want them to know besides the things you've shared, any projects or any other thing you want to say before we wrap up today's episode?
Okay, all right. We do have ahead of the mastermind group in May and June, the masterclass on transition. And we just feel like some people just need that initial push or understanding around what transitions is. And so this year we'll be launching the transition masterclass. It's free, but it's invitation based only. And so we will have the promotion out in different places and the links out when we start to pull, the cohorts together. And of course, that can also be shared with the release of this as well. So anyone who signs up now, you are sure you're going to be in the first cohorts that we're going to be having. But some of the things we've had conversations on today and some other things that I make in the first, or I kind of bring participants in the first 1 or 2 sessions of the mastermind group, you would enjoy as well in the masterclass. So again, it's free, but then it is invitation based only because there's something we always do in our mastermind groups or in our group sessions. It has limited seats. And I know when we use the word limited seats a lot of times, people always think, oh, you just want to say so that people can rush there. No, I tell you, it really has to be limited seats because what happens is that everybody is contributing to the conversation. So you can imagine a class of 20 people. We can't all contribute to the conversation. And you can bet you can't hide in that group. I will pick you out to be on the hot seat at some point. So you would enjoy being in that space and you would now appreciate why we can't be too many in the class. So it's limited seats, invitation only, but it is free. So the masterclass is something that I would say you want to probably look out for. The forms are already out and we're putting together the first cohort actually. And then we will send you the invitation for when we would have the first 2 sessions. So you pick the one that you would want to come on. I guess that's the only new thing that we have, but every other resource that we've always run with over the years, they are there on the website. The other new thing that we did have at the beginning of the year, in the last few weeks, we rounded off the season of the podcast with the beginning with the end in mind series, and so that's on.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
That's on YouTube. So if you're someone who is like still unclear, where do I start from? What do I do? And you're just trying to get some ideas, that's the series to definitely. We have 2 series on transitions on the YouTube channel, and we also have that series on podcasts that's on iTunes and Spotify. So that's really where I can say start on that and start to listen to stuff that can make you see possibilities. Because the thing about taking a step with a change is if you don't see that it is possible, you won't take it. I think that's just one of the things I need to let us realize now. You need to see that it is possible. And there was a video I shared a while ago, and I will end on that, is that when you're taking a step into a new terrain, most times what you think you want is a certainty. The truth is this, because we are human, we cannot be assured of the certainty of an outcome. So you can't go into a transition being sure, because anything can happen. What you're looking for is clarity. Clarity on what next you will do. Clarity on who you see yourself to be. If you have that now, you're fine to go. In the last episode of the series I just talked about, I mentioned something about how people always want to see the end. The end, you can't see the end in a transition fully. You can just have an idea, right? But if all you see now is the next step, when you take that next step, you will see the next step. And the next step could be, if you've done math, you know how we have options in math of BBI. There's a particular topic in math where there are options or something where you could go off tangent. You could probably go off tangent in something you didn't even think about, right? And that's why it's not really a game changer if you cannot really say all that you want. But if what you see now is clear, crisp enough, it's good enough to start. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. It's a journey, and that journey keeps unfolding as we go along, but you just need clarity. What should I do next? What should I do next? And keep going. Thank you so much for today. It's been wonderful. Great to have you. And we look forward to all the wonderful things, all the beautiful things. You keep showing us through the polished lens. And once again, thank you. And to our listeners, do listen to this, drop your comments. What have you learned? And please go to the Polished Lens website, look through it, and get something to do. Sign up for one of the cohorts and have a life transforming journey with FolaFayo. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thank you for having me. God bless. Bye.
Bye.